Hello, and thank you for listening to another episode of DanDanTony Sports. I am Dan Snyder. Here alongside me are Dan O'Shea and Tony Casper. How you guys doing tonight?
Pretty great.
Wonderful.
Excellent. Glad to hear that. So tonight we got a fun show in store. We're going to be talking about how we think we can fix the four major sports leagues. Before we get into that, we have, as always, our pigskin poetry. Tonight's poem is a heartfelt one that I wrote called Listen, Tony. Listen, Tony, I know you want to play, but do you want to go out the Brett Favre way? I get that you have passion, and I know you want to start, but seeing you in another jersey would surely break my heart. We had 14 great seasons, and I'd love you to come back, but I understand you want to play and not sit behind Dak. You need to know that in the end, I want what's best for you, but you need to retire and take Jason Witten too. With all my love, Dan Snyder.
Love it.
Very good.
Love
Big
it.
fan.
You guys ready to get into the meat and bones of what we're going to be doing tonight?
Yeah, just as an aside, he's totally going to go out the Brett Favre way. There's no way he goes out with grace. He's going to come back and maybe even get close with someone like the Texans and then inevitably break physically and mentally.
I hope not, because the Brett Favre way means going to the Jets.
Oh, God, please.
Well,
no.
he's going to drag this out, but as long as he doesn't send any lewd pics over his phone, I think he's going to make out better than Brett.
Probably.
The world can only hope.
So let's start with the NFL. Now, the NFL has a lot of issues going on right now. The first one I want to talk about isn't necessarily something that we would do to be able to fix the issue. It's just, what do we see as causing the issue? And that is low ratings. The NFL had low ratings last year, so I just want to get your guys' take on what you think is the reason for the low ratings. Some have attributed it to an election cycle, especially an extremely entertaining one this time. Some have said that they think the Colin Kaepernick protests have lent a hand to creating this drop in ratings. There's surely some other reasons. So, Dan, I just want to get your take. What is it that you think caused the NFL's low ratings this season?
I kind of don't think that the Colin Kaepernick debacle, for lack of a better word, was a huge deal, whether you agree or disagree. It's one player. He's only got so much of an effect. I think the election cycle probably did play a part. People only have so much time in the day to throw on their TV, and they probably put a decent amount into that. But also, there's a reason that the NFL has been dubbed the no fun league by a lot of players. I think fans like to see some celebrations. I certainly do. You want to see players having fun and enjoying the sport that they're doing. I've heard other people say less physicality of today's game might play a part. I disagree. I think it's still a great show that the players are putting on of skill and incredible athleticism. You don't really need those monstrous hits that can end a career game after game to have the same quality.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, what about you?
I think pace of play. I think we're seeing a lot of commercial time, and that's really pushing people away, unless, of course, you're fortunate enough to have Red Zone or an NFL ticket. It's a little hard for people to stay so focused on the game with how many commercials. I mean, one, before the kickoff, once the kickoff's received, there's one after that, and then they come right back to the drive. I think there's also, I think penalties are getting a little ridiculous too, especially celebration. I mean, they're playing a game after all. I mean, this is a game. I understand the NFL is worried about their logo, but to penalize somebody for an expression, as long as it's not lewd or using props, I just think you're taking away from what, at the end of the day, is the main goal here, and that's entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, just to expand off of that, what is the issue with a player dunking on the goalpost? Who does that harm?
Apparently the goalpost, because Jimmy Graham bent one, and that's when they put in the rule, which is crazy. But
right, just do the NBA rule, no hanging on the goalpost. How about that?
They're trying to promote sportsmanship among the younger viewers, and I understand and I get all of that. But we're definitely going to get more into celebration in just a few minutes. But I'm looking at it a little bit differently than the two of you have. I do think that Colin Kaepernick might have caused one demographic to decide that they're not going to watch as much football as they would have before, especially not 49ers games. So I think that played a very tiny little bit. I think mostly it was the election cycle. I think people thought it was must-see TV to watch Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And I think because you see it with a cycle, the election always brings lower ratings for the NFL. It just so happened to be quite a bit lower than normal. In addition to that, I'm going to go a bit opposite of what you said. I think part of it was the quality of play. Thursday night games this year, outside the last four, were pretty sloppy, and
I would totally agree with that.
Yeah, they were a bad representation of the skill of the NFL players. And Richard Sherman had even called it out, saying that it was bogus that they're playing on a Thursday when they just played on Sunday or Monday, because that doesn't give them enough time. Yeah, there's no time to rest. There's no time to practice and prepare. So he believes that would be a big reason as to why the ratings would have dipped, because it's just not the same quality of play that you see on Sunday and Monday. So there are some ways I was trying to think, how do you alleviate that? The one thing that I had thought of is extending the length of the season by 1 week. So start not the number of games, just the season in general, and give each team a second bye week. So you give them a bye week, guaranteed bye week, before they play a Thursday night game. So that
I think that could potentially solve that issue, because players have complained about it, coaches have complained about it, fans have complained about it because of, as you said, the quality on Thursday nights has declined.
There were just some bad overall matchups in this Thursday night one.
That's true.
I mean, what was one of them? Browns-Ravens?
Yeah.
Why? And that's so late in the end of the season that, given all the problems that there were with those two teams, I didn't understand how the NFL didn't know that might have been a scheduling conflict out the gate.
Because every team has to play a Thursday night game.
Yeah, and I get that. And these guys, listen, they make a lot of money to schedule these games. So, in my opinion, if you're working so hard on that, you can make sure that you've scheduled in a way that the team isn't maybe they're playing an early Sunday game at most, but maybe it aligns with their bye week in a manner to give them the time off. I also think, going back to the election, the ratings is affected because of this is an election that was so pivotal. I mean, you had two people who were going to be new in the office and running for them who had a lot of controversy based on them. We don't get elections, or even more re-elections, of presidents that are already sitting, that are running, that get this much coverage as we normally do, which I'm sure had a bigger effect than what it has in years past.
Yeah, that's completely the point that I was making, and Dan touched on that too. The election was a spectacle when in years past it had just been people who were in the political realm, people who were fans of person A, fans of person B, but this was just must-see TV. People who aren't political in nature are just so against one candidate, or they're so against the other that they have to watch. So that I think is the big driving factor for why the NFL had lower ratings. But moving on to what the NFL is trying to do, first thing I want to bring up is the 10-minute overtime period. They're talking about changing the 15-minute overtime to a 10-minute overtime. So I'm curious as to what you guys think about that. And Tony, what are your thoughts on changing from 15-minute overtime to 10 minutes?
I'm not entirely against it. I think we see a lot of ties. We're seeing a lot more ties as it is, and I think that would possibly boost the tie numbers. But that being said, we've also seen you got to put some urgency in here. These end up being quarters that seem to be played with the same chess-like precision as any other quarters in the NFL. Whereas maybe if you cut the time down, there is the urgency, okay, we need to get this in the end zone now, or we may not get another shot at this, and actually force teams to go for that end zone that ends the game, rather than play it cautious, kick a field goal, give the other team the ball. Can we keep them to the field goal? Do we really want to drag this out?
Yeah, because as we saw in Arizona versus Seattle, how many field goals were missed in that game?
Oh, yeah.
That game was miserable.
And Stephen Hauschka's a good kicker.
Yeah, he is.
He's a very good kicker, but he missed, what was it, 2 or 3 in the last 4 minutes that would have won the game.
3.
Crazy.
I'd have to look back on it, but at least 3.
My concern with shortening it is how much of an advantage does that give to the winner of the coin toss? If they receive and there's only a 10-minute quarter, you can do a long drive. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but you could do a long sustained drive and eat up easily over half of that and leave your opponent with less time. And if you're already receiving, then I feel like it's a little stacked based on a coin toss, unless they figure out a better way to decide who gets the ball. But I don't know that there is one.
You go the old XFL rules, put the ball in the center of the field, and you have to have one player from each team run to get it.
I'm sure that would totally, not work against their goal, or stated goal at least, of
player safety.
Yeah.
I feel that would have ill effects as well. Yeah.
Okay, well then how about you just have, line up each team's fastest player, one on one sideline, one on the other, and you race to the end. No, that's a terrible idea. But what I think would make the most sense is just switch to what college does. Okay, you start on the 25-yard line, and then you try and score. And the first team to outscore the other team wins. And if you get past the second overtime doing this system, and it's still tied, then you make it just like in college where you have to go for 2. You can no longer kick an extra point. You have to go for the 2-point conversion. I feel like that is the best in all sports. That is the best overtime. College football overtime is the best overtime, in my opinion. I think that would eliminate an issue with a 10-minute period. Because I feel like, and we'll get into this in a little bit, if you can't win outright in 70 minutes, you don't deserve to win. You don't deserve to win.
I'd agree. I also hate ties, so less ties is always better in my opinion.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that personally, because if you start having the more ties, that really makes every win mean that much more, especially come down to playoff time, especially if there's more ties in the league. Ties can make or break your year. So putting more emphasis on winning in overtime could potentially put the urgency in there in coaches to, we've got to win now. Tie's not going to cut it.
The Redskins got shafted because they had a tie.
Good.
Them and the Buccaneers were vying for the last playoff spot, and neither of them ended up getting it. It ended up going to the Packers because they came on strong toward the end. I'm sorry, not the Packers, the Lions. It ended up going to the Lions because the Packers surged ahead of them in the division. But the Redskins were poised, if not for that tie, to be the team in the playoffs and not the Lions. So the idea of a tie, I find actually pretty interesting, and I'm not like Tony. I'm not opposed to it. But what I am opposed to, and
I just think it's the most boring result of watching a game is to just have it end up as a draw.
I disagree. The most boring result of a game is a baseball team being up 2-1, 3-2 in the 8th inning and a rain out, and they call the game. That is the most boring.
I will raise that to a 0-0 tie in soccer. Because basically what you've done is just watch people run around on a field for 90 minutes and nothing was accomplished.
Yeah, but I enjoy track.
Then someone would win.
I enjoy track, though, so.
Then again, cricket can last for days. That's a commitment.
Absolutely. It is a very time-consuming sport to watch. But let's move on to what I think is going to be one of our favorite parts of the NFL here, and that is celebrations. So the NFL is trying to be more lenient on their celebration policy, which is, if you score, you basically can't do anything other than hand the ball to the ref and walk away. So what are your thoughts on what kind of celebration should be allowed, what shouldn't be allowed? Where do you draw that line?
Well, as Tony said before, lewd celebrations can't really be allowed. There's, kids watching, and, you don't really want to be doing that in front of them. But I think, letting players show their excitement for getting a touchdown, I think should totally be allowed. There's only so many touchdowns scored in a season. It's not like it's a...
Unless you're the Patriots.